Clyde are rock bottom of Scottish League 2, the lowest playable Scottish league in Football Manager, making Clyde the worst team in Scotland in Football Manager. So today we are rebuilding the club to fulfill 3 long-term challenges. Get Clyde up into the Scottish Premiership, topple Celtic and Rangers to win the title, and then win ourselves a European competition. This might take a little bit of time, especially as we need to get 3 promotions to just achieve the first objective. Clyde's best player is ball-winning midfielder Alexander King, in on loan from Greenock Morton in the Championship. But the player I am most excited about is our own Connor Young, who at 18 years old is going to lead the line. We have a small budget to make a couple of additions to the team. So we started with Julian Carey, a defensive midfielder to fill in for Ray Grant, who would start for us if he wasn't injured for 7 months. Then we brought in Michael Doyle to provide some leadership to our backline, and we finally picked up Harvey Gilmore, the younger brother of Billy Gilmore. Hopefully one day he'll be just as good. But as we're a part-time club, we can literally sign him and pay him 0 wages and just £10 a match if he plays. One of the many reasons why I love lower league football. We built ourselves a simple 4-3-3 to try and retain as much possession as possible and use our wingers to get the ball into the middle to Connor Young. We are predicted to finish 5th in the table, but I'd like to think we can cause an upset. Well, Connor Young scored a hat-trick on the opening day of the season, as we beat a team literally called the Spartans to get ourselves our first 3 points. Then he scored 4 goals against Peterhead in a 4-2 victory. Perhaps our defence wasn't the best, but as long as we have Connor Young, we'll score more goals than you. So thanks to 11 goals in 10 games from Connor, we sat on top of the table and were the early pace setters. Alex King was also amongst the goals, as well as contributing 6 assists from the centre of midfield. But as we approached January, disaster struck. Alex King's loan ends on January 2nd. And given he'd scored 7 and assisted 6 in the league, Greenock Morton wanted him to move up a division. Left winger Cian Leslie was also recalled by Kilmarnock after he scored 6 and assisted 7, presumably so he can be loaned out to a higher division as well. We've also lost our right winger Cian Gunn to a broken leg in December, and our other starting centre mid, Barry Cuddy, broke his foot in our last game of 2023. So we now face the prospect of playing the second half of the season without 4 of our key players. Luckily, we are still just on top of the table by a point thanks to Connor Young's 16 goals, but we need to bring in new players ASAP. For the left wing, we brought in Ethan Sutherland on loan from St Mirren, and the right wing, Matias Machado on loan from Montrose. Then we promoted Harvey Gilmore to the first team, and Ray Grant got back involved after his long-term injury. Let's hope this doesn't fall apart. Luckily, both wingers slotted in immediately, scoring goals and getting assists, as we continued our superb season and with 10 games to go, had stretched out a 10-point lead at the top of the table. Surely we can't bottle it from here. Well, of course we didn't. We won 8 of our final 10 games to lift the title and secure promotion to League 1. Connor Young ended up with an incredible 39 goals in the league this season, 43 when you add in a few goals from cup competitions. Understandably, he is wanted by a host of Championship and Premiership clubs, but with the game valuing him at just £65,000, I don't think we'll become rich by selling him. With the majority of the squad out of contract, the upcoming summer is going to be very busy, especially as the board have set as a target to reduce our reliance on loans and sign a maximum of just 2 loan players next season. The first offers for Connor Young were way too low for me, so I rejected them, which of course upset Connor. So we agreed to sell him if bids reached £150,000. We brought in 9 permanent players and 2 loans to give ourselves a small squad of 21 players. The pick of the bunch is new deep line playmaker Nicky Lowe, who I'm expecting a lot from this season. Luckily for us, the largest bid for Connor Young was only £86,000, so he stays at the club and will hopefully score a bunch of goals from Nicky Lowe assists. I wasn't that happy with our overall business, but I will take a pre-season prediction of 5th. We all know what happened last season when the pre-season preview put us in 5th place. We won our opening game of the season 2-0 against Queen of the South, with of course Connor Young on the score sheet. However, Cove Rangers really welcomed us to League 1, as they battered us 5-0, but that only motivated us to work harder. Connor Young was obviously scoring goals for fun, but it wasn't Nicky Lowe assisting him. New left winger Aaron Lyle had a knack of finding Young in the area to finish off the chances, and Harvey Gilmore was turning into a lethal goal-scoring midfielder, adding an extra dimension to our attack. So by New Year, we sat second in the table, 2 points behind Inverness. And when we played them for the final time this season in February, both sides were trading blows against each other. But going into the 85th minute, we had a 3-2 lead. But obviously, they then scored to share the points. And then they scored again to take all three back home with them. But despite that loss, overall we had a good run of results, and that reduced the deficit to 1 point with 7 games to go. But we also have to focus on the Cup. We've been given some kind draws in the Scottish Cup, and now had to take on Dundee United, who sit rock bottom of the Premiership. But this was the end of the road for us, as Dundee United won 1-0 with their only shot on target, but it does suggest that maybe we could actually fight with the big boys. It also didn't affect us in the league, as we ground out 1-0 wins over teams like Arbroath and Kelty Hearts, thanks to an unlikely goalscorer in Nicky Lowe. By the end of the season, our centre defensive midfielder had actually scored 15 goals in all competitions, and helped us overcome a faltering Inverness and lift the title for back-to-back promotions. The Championship, though, is going to be a lot tougher. This season, our target is to just avoid relegation. We're still relying on free transfers, and this season, a little bit more on the loan market to try and be competitive. But we are predicted to finish 9th, so it could be a long season. I am most excited about Mackenzie Carse. We're switching from a box-to-box midfielder to a Carolero to offer slightly more defensive protection, and I think he'll do great. But I reckon our new right winger Tom Walsh will have a big impact on our attack with his versatility. We got off to a good start with a 3-0 win over Cove Rangers, who also got promoted last season. Of course, our boys Connor Young and Harvey Gilmore were on the score sheet. But Tom Walsh ended up being our most prolific goal scorer early doors, earning us an important draw against Falkirk and helped us beat Wraith Rovers and Ayr United. In fact, our start to the season was unprecedented, as we won 8 of our first 10 games, putting us 6 points clear at the top of the table. But it turned out that was maybe luck, as we suffered defeats against Livingston, Dundee United, Falkirk and Partick Thistle, meaning we only won 2 more games and earned 9 points from our next 10 games. Connor Young may have also found his limit, as his 12 goals in all competitions had mostly come in cup games against lower league opponents. So we might need an inspired new signing to help us throughout the rest of the season and secure at least a playoff spot. So we poured all our available transfer budget into wages and signed a 36-year-old Solomon Rondon for 18 months on triple what our next top earner was making per week. He used all of his 115 caps of international experience to open up the scoring against Dunfermline and then grab a 95th minute winner to earn us all 3 points on his debut. Rondon's goals kept coming. Admittedly, a lot of them from the penalty spot, but our overall form did improve. But we just couldn't match the early pace we set at the start of the season, and we slipped further behind Cove Rangers with 6 games to go. It's really interesting that the 2 teams tipped for 9th and 10th this season are currently 1st and 2nd. But before we play those 6 games, we've made it to the final of the Scottish Challenge Cup. For those unfamiliar, and to overly simplify things, the Scottish Challenge Cup is like the Bristol Street Motors Trophy, so no one actually cares about this competition unless your team makes the final. We're taking on Inverness Caledonian Thistle, and 28 minutes in, left winger Calvin Miller was brought down in the penalty area, and the ref gave Rondon the chance to score from the spot, which he did. Late in the second half, substitute Marley Sweeney-Rowe scored a screamer from the edge of the area to give us a 2-goal lead, but Inverness did cause a brief bit of panic late on, but it was too little, too late. We won the tie and the cup. However, we couldn't use that to inspire us to a late title charge, thanks to 3 heavy losses. But it did mean we secured ourselves a playoff spot in 2nd place. First of all, Dundee United play Falkirk, and then we play the winner of that match. And then the winner of our match plays against Dundee from the league above us. Dundee United ended up beating Falkirk 4-2 over 2 legs and now had 2 games against us. We raced into a 2-goal lead away from home, with Carr scoring the first and Carre scoring the second. But we got complacent as Dundee United scored twice either side of half-time to draw the match. In the home leg, once again we took the lead through Aaron Lyle, and once again Dundee United fought back. At 90 minutes it was 3-3 on aggregate, but a moment of magic from Hamish Ritchie gave us the lead to win in extra time. So we have prevented a Dundee derby, but can we beat the team from across the road to get ourselves promoted to the Premiership? Well, at our place, Dundee scored within 60 seconds to set the tone of the game. And then they scored within 90 seconds of the second half to win the match 2-0. Then at their place, they took an early lead, and despite a Harvey Gilmore goal, the comeback wasn't on. We lost 3-1 on aggregate. Solomon Rondon had done his job though and became the club's top scorer. Surely with him in our ranks next season, we're going to be unstoppable. And so in season 4, the board have said we have to get promoted. This season we had to end up paying for a few loans, but Kelby Vaughan, a regen from Hibs, looks like he could be the linchpin of our squad. Whilst I'm also expecting a lot from James Brown at right back to help us keep some clean sheets. With an improved squad, the season preview puts us in 5th place. And we all remember what happened the last 2 times the season preview put us in 5th place. The big debate this season is Rondon or Young. Rondon is the way better player, but given he's approaching 37 years old and has no physical ability left, surely he won't be able to use his superior technical and attacking ability to its full effect. So we gave Young the nod for the season opener. But actually, new centre-back Conor McAvoy scored the only goal of the game. So against Falkirk, we started Rondon, and he scored a brace. So we carried on with him, and he scored past Dundee United, Partick Thistle, Livingston, and by the time we played 10 games, he was the league's top scorer with 10 goals, as we sat 4 points ahead of Livingston atop the table. So that settled the striker debate. But as it did last season, our form started to dip again, as we only picked up 14 points from the next available 30. And as a result, we now dropped behind Livingston by 2 points. We were in a title battle, but were on the losing side. However, we picked up huge wins over Dundee United and Greenock Morton, drew against Hamilton and Kilmarnock, and we also lost to Falkirk. So when it came to our final meeting of the season against Livingston, we had to win. And fortunately for us, Rondon gave us the lead. Tom Walsh then doubled it, and Josh McCulloch secured all 3 points with a 3rd goal. And thanks to a bit of poor form from Livingston, it means with 4 games to go, we now have a 6-point lead over our rivals. Surely, we can't bottle it from here. Well, we lost to Wraith Rovers in the 91st minute. Rondon missed a penalty to stop us beating Greenock Morton. Then we conceded late away from home to Hamilton to draw the match, and Kilmarnock battered us 3-0. That was not part of the plan. But despite this, we somehow stayed on top of the table by a single point to earn promotion to the Premiership and tick off the first major milestone of the rebuild. We have Solomon Rondon to thank with his 22 league goals, but all good things must come to an end. The 37-year-old is due to retire at the end of the season. Thanks for everything, Solomon. We salute you, and we subscribe to the channel. It's what he would have wanted, to be fair. Once again, we got to work squad building, with new striker Ethan Laidlaw looking to take the reins and get us goals this season. But my favourite signing was Brazilian right winger Keiki, who was let go from Man City and is now the club's top earner. But he is Brazilian, so it is completely fine. We also picked up 18-year-old centre-back Richie Fulton on a free from Livingston. He has 5-star potential, but forced in a £650,000 minimum fee release clause, which feels too low. I hope this doesn't come back to haunt us. But naturally, we are at 600 to 1 odds to win the title, and are favourites to go down by quite some distance. So the board just want us to beat Cove Rangers' point tally from last season, which was 12. Surely that can't be too difficult, right? Well, when we lost 7-0 to Rangers on the opening day of the season, it certainly seemed a lot more difficult. We then went 3-0 down at home against Hearts, but on loan centre mid Junior Sandoval scored Clyde's first Scottish Premiership goal since 1972. We still lost 3-1, but it was still a momentous occasion. When Ethan Laidlaw scored his first goal for the club 7 minutes into the game against Motherwell, we had a good feeling. The match was end to end. Neither team's defence put up much of a fight, but with the game poised at 3-3 in the 80th minute, we had the extra bit of energy to go on and score 2 more goals to win our first game in the Premiership 5-3. And then we won our next game against St Johnstone, but the winning wasn't to last. At least we aren't bottom of the table, and we're only 5 points away from beating Cove Rangers' total from last season. However, we did hit a purple patch in the autumn. Connor Young and Ethan Laidlaw both found form. And so, as one would start and score, the other would then come off the bench and also score. We ended up winning 5 out of 7 games, including a match where there was a severe kit clash with Aberdeen and a revenge match against Rangers. But then, the draws started. The good news is, we didn't really lose a game, but we also didn't really win. Overall though, thanks to our purple patch, we were well away from the relegation zone and looked comfortable by New Year's. But our New Year form made the draws look incredible. The only bright spark was when we beat Ross County, who sit rock bottom of the table. Fortunately for us, the other teams around us have been just as bad, and we still stood a chance of being in the Championship group at the end of the season. After 33 games, the Scottish League splits in 2. The top 6 play each other once to fight out for the title and European places, and the bottom 6 play each other once to try and avoid relegation. So we managed to record wins over Dundee and Queen's Park to pick up 6 points, which is all we got as we lost our other 3 games, but we just snuck into 6th place and the Championship group. The downside is we are likely to get absolutely battered, and even if we did win every single game, the highest we could possibly finish is 5th place. However, we did manage to win 3 games, which is much more than I was expecting. But of course, we stayed in 6th place and away from European football. All in all, an incredible first season in the Premiership, where Connor Young ended up as our top scorer. An incredible feat for the man who started with us in League 2. Now in the Premiership, we actually have a little bit of money. So the board this season wants us to start paying transfer fees for some young, talented players. So we broke the club's record transfer fee on Adam McGrath, bringing in the centre midfielder for just £35,000 from Ayr United in the Championship. And then we smashed that as we paid £275,000 for Charlie Earl after he helped Rochdale get promoted from the National League last season. This year we only had 9 incomings, and we have a nice balance of experienced players like Regan Hendry, who comes in after being released by Bristol City, and youth such as right back Callum Howard-Moore, who we poached from Guiseley in England's 7th division. We also brought in centre-back Greg Hilson, who was let go by Everton at the end of his contract. So I'm feeling pretty good about the future of the team, as 5 of our starters are teenagers with lots of potential. But can you win anything with kids? Well, the pre-season preview doesn't seem to think so, as it puts us 11th in the table at the start of the season. Despite being pushed to the bench by the new players, Harvey Gilmore came off the bench to show the rest of the youngsters how to score, as we beat Hibs 1-0 on the opening day of the season. But then we learned sometimes youth isn't the answer, as Celtic battered us 7-1. Connor Young wasn't going to give up his starting spot lying down, as he scored a brace past St Mirren as new boy Charlie Earl scored his first goal for the club. But on deadline day, Man City triggered the £650,000 minimum fee release clause of 20-year-old centre-back Richie Fulton. I knew when we signed him that release fee clause was too low. Despite his loss, we did stay strong defensively, and after 10 games, we find ourselves 4th in the table, albeit closer in points to the relegation playoff than the top spot. To try and accommodate both Connor Young and Charlie Earl, I've moved Young to the left wing, where he is flourishing and scoring goals alongside Earl. And whilst they aren't the most lethal in the league, their efforts are keeping us in the hunt for European football. So we pushed on and kept getting results. Ethan Laidlaw got a rare game and scored twice against Hibs. Once again, the Red Derby against Aberdeen resulted in a Clyde win, as Connor Young scored a hat-trick and Keiki even got a rare goal in a win over Dundee. So by the end of the regular season, we were in 3rd place and 5 games away from European football. If we finish 3rd or 4th, we are guaranteed some form of European football. But if we drop to 5th, we could miss out depending on the winner of the Scottish Cup. We kept a clean sheet and beat Kilmarnock 2-0 to get us off to winning ways. And then Zach Johnson, on loan from Burnley, scored the only goal of the game to beat Aberdeen. Understandably, we lost to Rangers, but only 1-0, and we then had a great reply as Connor Young scored a brace to beat St Mirren 3-0. Then obviously we lost to Celtic 2-0, but it was enough. We finished 3rd in the table and have secured Europa League football for next season. In the end, it was once again Connor Young who topped the scoring charts. But a special mention has to go out to Keiki for being so productive with a number of assists. But we're going to need some reinforcements next season, as the board want us to at least reach the knockout rounds of the Europa League. But that also means we can now send our scouts to all of Europe and find great deals, meaning we spent over £1 million. New box-to-box midfielder Gramoso might be the pick of the bunch, but goalkeeper Wilson Marias might end up taking my #1 spot this season. The league campaign started off well, but it wasn't our focus. We needed to beat AEK Athens to reach the Europa League proper, and we had to play new keeper Wilson Marias as our first choice keeper from the previous 5 seasons picked up an injury, ruling him out for both legs. In a quiet first half at our place, AEK scored first, before they doubled their lead early in the second. But we fought back. The defence parted to allow left-back Jack McKenzie to score first, and the second, before he turned provider to Charlie Earl for the third, who also scored the fourth to make sure we won 4-2. Then in Athens, we took the lead through Connor Young for an unassailable 5-2 aggregate lead. However, the Greeks thought differently, and the hostile atmosphere got to our players, as slowly but surely they made it 3-1 on the night and 5-5 on aggregate. So we had to go to extra time where the inevitable happened. AEK scored and we were knocked out of the Europa League. But there is a silver lining. Being knocked out at this stage of the Europa League qualifying rounds puts us into the Europa Conference League instead. I think we've been given some very kind fixtures and will travel to countries like Iceland and Georgia. In the meantime, on deadline day, 2 huge bids came in for Charlie Earl. A lot of the money was based on the chance that he might play 50 league games for them in the future and he might score 20 league goals. So all in all, it just didn't seem worth it, and we said no. So we travelled to Iceland for our opening game of the Conference League with Charlie Earl, but won 1-0 thanks to Connor Young. As you would expect, we weren't quite good enough to beat French side Nantes, but as we travelled to Georgia to play Dinamo Batumi, we scored 3 goals without conceding to secure a huge win to get our Conference League campaign back on track. Charlie Earl then got himself a brace as we won at home against Croatian side Rijeka, but we didn't have enough about us to go and get a win away at Anderlecht. And despite 2 late goals for Moldovan side Sheriff, we scored 3 goals before that to win the game 3-2. That puts us 12th in the league phase to go into the playoff round. As for the league though, the extra European games was perhaps affecting our form, meaning that by New Year we sat 5th in the table, 5 points worse off than where we were at this point last season. We also must have a very high potential player in Charlie Earl, as although he's had a good return this season, it's not the best in the league, but the top clubs still want him. The best bid came in January from Man City, but I want a lot more money up front before we start saying yes. But he didn't perform in the first leg of our Europa League playoff round against Maccabi Haifa. Luckily, our centre-back Conor McAvoy scored the only goal of the game and the overall tie, as we drew the second leg 0-0 to progress after winning 1-0 on aggregate. But we had been given a tough draw against Leeds United in the round of 16. Can we beat a Premier League side? Well, not at our place. Despite a great defensive effort, Leeds were just too strong in the end. However, Charlie Earl scored early doors in the away leg, and Regan Hendry's penalty made it 2-2 on aggregate. But again, Leeds had just too much about them and scored in the 85th minute to win the tie 3-2 on aggregate. But it does mean that we can focus on league games where we had been faltering. Our only real chance of European football would be by finishing in 5th place, unless we won the Scottish Cup, where we'd reach the semi-finals. Well, we didn't win that or many other games for the rest of the season, but we did just enough to sneak into 5th place, but with 15 less points than last season. Charlie Earl was our star man, but maybe we do need to cash in on him to spend big in other areas to improve. Sadly, we are saying goodbye to Keiki, who declined our new contract offer to go back to Brazil, and to Harvey Gilmore, who just can't quite cut it in the Premiership after joining us way back in Season 1. In Season 8, the board wants us to break into the league's top 2, which seems like a mental ask after last season's performance. But even more so because some of the squad want me to sell Charlie Earl. Now, I do actually want to sell him, but the offers just aren't good enough. I want at least 15 million and we are barely being offered 8 million. But as the summer went on, no reasonable bids came in, and he actually asked to withdraw his transfer request. But because we didn't sell him for money, we had to rely on the free transfer market more. With what money we did have, we signed Serbian left wing-back Vladimir Mihailovic for £750,000 and bought winning midfielder Ben Gleeson for a record transfer fee of 1.3 million from Arsenal. We're keeping the same shape, but shifting tactics to what we use with St Etienne on our Let's Plays with them over on the second channel. Link to that one is down in the description. Because we finished 5th last season, we had to go through 3 qualifying rounds in the Conference League, which were easy enough, but our league phase games are way tougher than last season. As for the league, we got off to a good start, as Charlie Earl scored a hat-trick against Livingston and new right winger Danny Rodriguez scored 2 penalties in a historic 3-2 win over Celtic, our first win against the boys in this rebuild. Charlie Earl is the league's top scorer, but the table looks pretty tight 7 games in as we sit in 6th place. Back to the Conference League, and we surprised ourselves with a 2-0 win over French side Lens, as Connor Young and Charlie Earl scored both the goals. But even more impressive was a 2-1 win over Crystal Palace, although we do need to thank Tyreek Mitchell for his bizarre own goal. Our other results were as good as we could have expected them to be, so we finished 13th in the league phase and will once again head to the playoff round. As for the Premiership, this season we have the squad depth to compete, beating Rangers 3-2 thanks to Connor Young, securing a late win over Livingston as 33-year-old James Bree scored the winner in the 93rd minute, and even Reagan Hendry was scoring goals for us. So by New Year, we sat 3rd in the table, a point behind Rangers with a game in hand. Back to the Conference League, and we'd been drawn against Honka from Finland, who shocked us by beating us 2-1 in the first leg at their place. But thankfully, Kieran Bowie was on hand to get our goal. He then also scored in the second leg to make it 2-2 on aggregate before super sub Ethan Laidlaw scored late on to seal the win. Next up was PSV Eindhoven, where apparently there wasn't a kick clash. We managed to earn ourselves a 1-1 draw, but thanks to a defensive error from PSV in the second leg, probably because of the kick clash, we scored the only goal of the game to progress to the quarterfinals. At this point, the kick clashes were happening quite a lot, so I just presumed it was a bug in the game. Until I realised that Clyde, for whatever reason, have 2 red kits. Back in the Premiership, we had a great start to the new year, but began to falter with losses to Aberdeen and St Mirren. With 4 games to go between the league splits, there is a super tight fight for second place with us, Rangers, Aberdeen and Hibs, and we have to play all 3 of them in our next 4 games. So we started off by just beating Aberdeen 1-0 thanks to a 94th minute winner from Connor Young. But what happened next was completely beyond belief. We played the game of our life, and Rangers completely fell apart as everything we touched turned to gold in a remarkable 7-1 win at home, with Kieran Bowie scoring himself a hat-trick in the process, as well as collecting an assist for good measure. The stats weren't even that remarkable. It makes it look like it was actually a pretty close game. Then, thanks to goals from Connor Young, Kieran Bowie and Charlie Earl, we also managed to beat Hibs 3-2 away from home. Including a win over Dundee, we won our last 4 games of the regular season to give ourselves a 2-point lead over Rangers heading into the league split. And we're only 5 behind Celtic. Could a miracle be about to happen? Well, we needed one in the Europa League quarter-final, as Crystal Palace took a 2-goal lead in the first leg away from home. Back at our place though, the man Kieran Bowie was credited with the opening goal of the game, before Palace quickly scored one of their own. But then we started to get into our groove, scoring a second through Danny Rodriguez. Bowie then scored our third, and Rodriguez scored our fourth, meaning we were winning 4-3 on aggregate with 12 minutes to go. But in the 92nd minute, Czech Decore broke our hearts and levelled the scores. After a goalless extra time, it was down to penalties. Both sides scored their first penalties, but then we both missed the second. The third penalty takers both ended up scoring to make it 2-2. But disaster struck, as Dean Henderson saved our fourth penalty and Palace scored theirs. Luckily, we scored our fifth to keep us in the game, and then Chris Richards hit the crossbar to keep the shootout at 3-3 heading into sudden death, where we put it wide, giving Palace the chance to win again, but this time Marias made an all-important save. So with our 7th penalty, we took the lead and had the chance to win. Marias made himself big and stopped the shot. We're going to the semi-finals where we're taking on Betis. Before then, we played Celtic in the Championship group and earned ourselves a point with our only shot on target. We then packed our bags and travelled to Seville, and missed a golden opportunity to win the game as Danny Rodriguez missed a penalty, meaning we drew 0-0. But the second leg was masterful. Danny Rodriguez made up for missing his penalty by opening up the scoring, whilst Charlie Earl got the second from close range. Betis then managed to pull one back, but in the second half, we scored 2 goals from corners to dominate the match, win the tie, and qualify for the Europa Conference League final. We also picked up a win over St Mirren, meaning as long as we didn't bottle the final 3 games before our final against Fiorentina, we'll finish in 2nd place in the league. But it didn't start well with a 1-0 loss to Rangers, but a dramatic 6-4 win over Hibs gave us hope. And thankfully, Hibs then did us a favour as they beat Rangers whilst we lost to Aberdeen to just secure 2nd place by 2 points and Champions League football for next season. But now it all came down to the final game of the season, the Conference League final against Fiorentina. There was only one highlight in the first half as Connor Young won the ball deep. Charlie Earl then carried it up the pitch and switched the play to the far side, but the final effort was tipped away from the goal by the keeper. Half-time, 0-0, with Fiorentina having all the possession but doing nothing with it. Early in the second half, left-back Mihailovic had a mazy dribble into the penalty area, but his shot in the end was way over the bar. So with nothing happening, I was about to make changes, but then Fiorentina came forward with the ball down the right-hand side of the pitch to attack. Ranieri was shaping up to shoot on the edge of the area, but McGrath just got in the way to stop the effort. The ball fell to Danny Rodriguez, who sprinted the entire length of the pitch and delivered a low cross into the area. It was missed by Charlie Earl, but not by Connor Young, who buried his effort and gave us the lead. From an 18-year-old boy in League 2 to giving us the lead in the Conference League final, his story is incredible. Earl was having a poor game, so we moved Young up top and brought on super sub Kieran Bowie and tried to settle the game down. But the Viola kept coming and eventually got the goal they craved to level the score. But Kieran Bowie wasn't going to have that. We almost scored from a corner, but it fell to our super sub, who fired his shot into the back of the net and gave us the lead in the 87th minute. Then we just had to shut the game down and waste time, which worked. Clyde are the Europa Conference League champions. Led by captain Connor Young, they've done the unthinkable and ticked off the second long-term objective of the rebuild. Now, all we have to do is win the Scottish Premiership. We didn't talk about him too much this season, but Charlie Earl was still our top scorer by a long way. But the sheer amount of players in double-figure goals is remarkable, although we did play 64 games across the entire season. So our objective from here on out is to win the league title, but we'd have to do it without star centre-back Bruno, who had his £14.75 million release fee clause met by a Saudi Arabian club, which was great as we'd have plenty of money to spend. However, we'd actually made all our transfers by this point, so it came too late in the window to have any real effect. But our scouts, who are now going all over the world, found an excellent replacement in Morteza Ghalami from Iran. So we bought him for £2 million, breaking the club transfer record fee. We also sent scouts to South America, who found Brian Dominguez to start ahead of Connor Young and Kieran Bowie on the left wing for £1 million, and we also poached Ronan Parker from Hibs to play backup to Charlie Earl, who had no bids made for him this summer. This season we're in the Champions League, but we have to go through 2 qualifying rounds. We'd been matched up with Porto to start off with, and the Portuguese side scored first. But we battled hard and ruined the home crowd's night with 2 late goals, including a penalty from new centre-back Ghalami to win 2-1. However, at our place, Porto flexed their muscles and outclassed us on the night, with Randall Kolo Muani scoring a brace in a 3-1 win to win 4-3 on aggregate, knocking us out of the Champions League before we even got started. Luckily for us though, that only knocks us down into the Europa League, so we do have some European football this season. But remember, our main goal this season is to win the league, and we had a pretty decent start. We drew away from home to Kilmarnock, and then away from home to Hearts, and picked up a draw against Celtic at home. But we managed to get a 3-0 win over Queen's Park, a 2-1 win over Dundee, and a 3-1 win over Dundee United to put us 4th in the table. If we can keep averaging 2 points per game, we'll be there or thereabouts. As for the Europa League, I actually felt fairly confident that we could win most of these games. Brian Dominguez capped off a nice move to help us beat Maccabi Tel Aviv 2-0, before Adam McGrath scored a super goal in the 96th minute to beat Galatasaray 4-3 at their own place. Then Connor Young scored the 3rd and 4th goals as we thrashed Brentford 4-0 away from home, before it got even better, as Danny Rodriguez scored a hat-trick against AIK in the 6-0 win, and Charlie Earl had a tap-in at the end of a 5-0 win over Freiburg. 5 games played and 5 games won puts us top of the Europa League table with 3 games to go. However, we did slip up in the league, losing 3-2 to St Mirren, 2-0 to Rangers, and dropped 2 points with a frustrating 3-3 draw against Kilmarnock. It puts us 4th in the table, but 8 points behind Celtic, which feels like an impossible gap to overcome. But we carried on winning home and away, picking up 3 points wherever we went, including a huge 3-1 win over rivals Rangers. That was pivotal for our league position. However, we just couldn't beat Celtic, who won the game at their place pretty comfortably 3-1. The only other sticking point was a 1-1 draw with Aberdeen, but we didn't lose in the Europa League. We may have drawn the game against Rennes, but we demolished Polish side Rakow 10-0 and took apart Danish side Viborg 4-2 to finish 1st place in the league phase. So we had a month off from European football until we take on Real Sociedad, and we have to make that time count in the league. Charlie Earl left it late, but his 86th minute goal got us all 3 points against Kilmarnock, before his 9th minute strike against Hearts was the only goal of the game as we won that one as well. Brian Dominguez then took the scoring reins against St Mirren as we cruised to a 3-0 win, but most importantly, we looked the part against Celtic, who had fallen into a bit of bad form, which basically means they drew a few games, but they capitulated against us as we battered the boys 4-0 at home. We did the exact same to Dundee, although our last 2 goals came in the final 4 minutes, and Dundee United did just better than Dundee as they managed to score 1 goal as we beat them 4-1. Our only banana skin was once again Aberdeen, but I don't mind that because we fought ourselves back to within 3 points of Celtic with 9 games to go. Maybe we could actually do it. Back in the Europa League, we travelled to San Sebastian and romped home to a famous 5-1 win with Dani Rodriguez scoring 4 goals. It was perhaps the pinnacle of our season. We're travelling to some of Europe's biggest clubs and embarrassing them in front of their own fans. We topped the league phase and now this. There was no way anyone was going to stop us from winning the Europa League this season. Oh. Well, it's not ideal, is it? At least it now means we can solely focus on winning the league. Although our focus did slip against Livingston, we fought back to keep winning. And with Celtic being our first game of the Championship group, a win would see us climb above the green and white for the first time in this rebuild. It was a match of few good chances for either side, but there was one decisive moment. Just before half-time, a Dani Rodriguez corner was cleared to Brian Dominguez, who unselfishly passed the ball to Charlie Earl, whose thunderous effort hit the back of the net for the game's only goal. And so with 4 games to play, we have a 2-point lead to protect. But we had a nightmare as we drew 0-0 with St Mirren as Celtic beat Rangers 3-1, meaning we're on level points but stay ahead of Celtic on goal difference. Luck swung back in our direction as we beat Hibs and Celtic drew with Aberdeen, restoring our 2-point lead. However, away at Rangers, we fell to a 1-0 defeat as a deflected shot sent our keeper the wrong way. But somehow, Celtic also failed to win, being held by Hibs to a draw. So it means that going into the final day of the season, we have a 1-point lead and we just need to beat Aberdeen, who have been our bogey side this season. Of course, it all came down to the Red Derby, as both teams wear the same colour shirts, but we wear white shorts and black socks. Still, I reckon it caused confusion in the penalty area from a Charlie Earl corner, which was headed home by Ben Gleeson to give us the all-important lead in a cagey first half of very few chances. Celtic at this point were also winning, so it was crucial that we now didn't concede, else the green and white would take the top spot. On the hour mark, we had a golden opportunity. Now obviously, I have no idea who actually are our own players because of the kick clash, but the ball was put into the middle of the Aberdeen penalty area, but the shot eventually saved. But eventually, that second goal came, as Dani Rodriguez scored one of the best free kicks I have ever seen in Football Manager. Moments later, there was more confusion in the penalty area, but this time the woodwork came to Aberdeen's rescue. But as Celtic made it 3-1 in their game, I just wanted one more goal to seal the victory and the title. Especially as Aberdeen were coming closer and closer to pulling a goal back, which would have been unbearable. But thankfully, time was on our side. And as the full-time whistle was blown, we had done enough to be crowned the champions of Scotland and complete the rebuild of Clyde. From the worst team to the best team, it's been a journey that we could not have done without Connor Young. He is my new hero. So if you enjoyed this video, I reckon you're going to enjoy this one, where the video only ends when we win the World Cup with Senegal. It could be a long one, so strap yourselves in and enjoy.